Yes, a very good afternoon, everyone. So, we are here live on the discussion of the first paper, the first paper of Public Administration Test Series. Based on analysis of whatever I have seen as of now, those who have written the test, and when I was going through your answer scripts, I felt the need to take up this discussion so that you understand what exactly are the fundamental requirements of the answer writing idea. What improvements can be made. Okay, so yes, let's start. Let's begin our discussion. Let's start. What I'll be doing is I will be taking some questions up from the first test paper, and in this, primarily what I'll be doing is I will be discussing those questions which require analysis. Okay, so if it is something which is related to the analytical part of public administration, I will take up that. Most of these questions are statement based questions, and what I have found is that most of you find difficulties related to these kind of questions. uh, now I will make certain observations also, some answer scripts that I have corrected. I found no I found that you can say it to be some mistakes that you have committed. So without any doubt, yes, let's begin. A very good afternoon to all of you. Let's begin our discussion. See, in this particular paper, if you look at the questions that are there in these questions, as you know, section A, just a moment, just a moment. Yes, uh, we'll all of you who are live, please remain live. We'll just come back in 2 to 3 minutes, uh, 2 to 3 minutes, because there is a technical issue that is there. So we'll just come back in 2 to 3 minutes. Okay, so please have patience. Give me 2 or 3 minutes. Okay, so welcome back. Sorry for slight delay. Okay, so what we are going to do is we are going to look at certain questions that were asked in your first test of the test series that we are taking up. Now, as you can see, look at, I will not be, no, I will be dealing with some questions which are very important and which require, which require some form of analysis. Okay. So look at the first question. Public administration has moved from government to governance and now towards networked governance. Okay. So what, now this particular question that is there, as you can see, this question is, no, it's something which requires a bit of analytical answer. And I am going to tell you how you are supposed to build an answer. Okay. Because remember, no question that you are going to get there, no, not all questions are likely to come from directly what you have read, which is mentioned in the syllabus. Sometimes the knowledge that you gain by analyzing, by understanding the basic concepts, that is to be used. Okay. So look at the first question. Let us try and answer the very first question. Okay. Let us try and answer this question. Public administration has done what? Public administration has moved from government to governance and now to networked governance. To what? To networked governance. Okay. I hope it is visible. If it is not visible, I am reading out the question. The question is, public administration has moved from government to governance and towards networked governance. Okay. So what is, no, how are you going to approach this particular question? Now, in this question, what is the basic demand? What is the basic demand of the question? This is, see, every question has a basic theme. Every question has a basic theme. You have to that basic theme is the center of your answer, and you are supposed to do what? You are supposed to build around that very theme. And this particular question, it has what? It has the theme of how public administration as a discipline has evolved. Okay. How public administration has evolved. Public administration, how it has evolved as a discipline. This is the central, this is the basic theme of this, of this particular question. Now, every question that you write should have a structure. Structure meaning there should be a proper introduction, there should be a proper body, and there should be a proper conclusion of your, of your answers. Okay. So in this case, what would be the introduction of the question? Most of the times, what I have been reading, all the all the answer scripts that I that I correct, I find that if you are someone who has read public administration, you are good at writing the body, that is the central theme, but how to structure the question, that is how to provide a better introduction and how to provide a conclusion, that is something which I find is missing. And even for those who are writing test series, this year's test series, maybe you're attempting this year's mains examination also, while I was correcting your answer scripts, I found this to be one of the central problems. Okay. So introduction, introduction is something where you are supposed to do what? You are supposed to, you are supposed to focus. Now you are supposed to do what? You are supposed to focus on this very idea, and once you have understood what is the central theme, you are supposed to provide a background information related to that particular theme. Okay. You are supposed to provide background information. Like in this case, as we have already mentioned, it is about what? It is about evolution. It's about evolution. Okay. Now, because it is about evolution, so what we are supposed to do is we are supposed to emphasize on this aspect. And from from our knowledge of public administration, one thing that we have understood properly is that public administration is a discipline with a very dynamic scope. Public administration is a discipline with a very dynamic scope. And what has this dynamism done? Dynamism has always resulted into changing scope of the discipline. That means what actually is read, what is the primary content of the discipline, it has varied from era to era, from different paradigms, and it also has, it is something which has dependent upon what it has been dependent upon the environment in which public administration has functioned. Clear? So what are you supposed to write in the introduction here? Your introduction should primarily include the emphasis on dynamism of public administration's scope. Emphasis on dynamism of public administration scope. This is what you are supposed to write here, which means you would write about how public administration is a discipline which has evolved taking into consideration its ecology. You will write about the evolution being based on the ecology of public administration, meaning the changes that has happened, in the in the political setup or in the economic, economic arena. Those changes have impacted the scope of the discipline of public administration. This is what I mean when I say the ecology of public administration is what has changed. Now this is a 10 marker, okay? So you cannot go on writing all of it. You just need to do what? You just need to write maybe 30 to 40 words on it, okay? So emphasizing on dynamism of the discipline, emphasizing on how it has been impacted by its ecology, and also emphasizing on how the changes happening in the political arena, in the economic arena, in the social arena, and that has also impacted the scope of the discipline of public administration. This is what you are supposed to write in the introduction part of it, okay? I hope this is something which is understood, that this is what you are supposed to write. अब देखो, इसमें जो भी हमने अभी डिस्कस किया है, the introduction part, it is not rocket science. All of us who have basically studied public administration, we know about this, है ना? All of us, we know about it. There is nothing that you need to read extra. Okay, only the basic knowledge, but proper understanding of it will suffice. Okay, now let's come to the body part of your answer. So what is the body part of your answer? In the body part of your answer, you are going to write about this movement from government to governance and now towards networked governance. Okay, so when we come to the very first part, which is the when we come to the very first part, which is the government. So this is what? This government is something that we associate with traditional public administration. Okay, traditional public administration is what we associate the term government with. Now, what was traditional public administration? Traditional public administration was where we had the bureaucracy responsible for every government, every function. We had a rigid hierarchical structure, rigid hierarchical structure of bureaucracy. Okay, now remember, it is a 10 marker. So again, I have to understand how much I can write here. Okay, I cannot write everything. Clear? I cannot write everything here. So what you need to do is you need to constrain that aspect. Now, coming to the second part, the movement from traditional public administration to governance, or from government to governance. Now, this movement that is there, what does this movement signify? This movement signifies that now public administration is now emphasizing on the involvement of private sector. It is the involvement of private sector. The role of public administration is now moving from rowing to steering. Okay, now the role of administration, the role of government is also changing, and now the government is not anymore responsible for rowing, it is responsible for steering, which means it has more of a regulatory function, and there is decentralization of functions to the private sector. Okay, so the theme of decentralization, devolution to the private sector, Okay, now remember that this theme is something which we have read as a part of the introduction of public administration, and we see the same theme being propagated by the NPM public choice approach. NPM public choice approach, what does it do? New public management. In fact, the very concept of public management was about doing what? The state withdrawing and more participation coming from the private sector. Okay, that was the basic thing. Even public choice approach talks about what? Public choice approach talks about how this assumption that government is taking decisions always in public interest, how that is romanticism, how it is not it's not really true. That is what leads them to propagate the idea of plural, the concept of institutional pluralism, that is involvement of the private sector. Okay, now then comes the third idea, which is now we talk about network governance. And what is this network governance about? Network governance is where what we now look at is that public administration or administration no more is the sole responsibility of the private sector. So this concept of network governance first of all highlights the problems with the private sector, So if we leave everything up to the private sector, how that could be the problems that are there, that could itself be a problem, and therefore there is a need to do what? There is a need to adopt a more networked approach. A networked approach, meaning more participative, a more participative approach where the civil society organizations, the citizens, the private sector, and bureaucracy, all these organizations do what? All these organizations cooperate to achieve the goals that the state has. So where we started with the first approach, traditional public administration, where the emphasis was on one institution, that is the sole institution of bureaucracy. From there, the movement to governance approach, where emphasis was placed on privatization and institutional pluralism. And from there, moving to the contemporary approach, where it is about participation and cooperation coming from all sectors and not necessarily limited to either the bureaucracy or the private sector. So the bureaucracy along with the private sector, as well as the other civil society organizations and other organizations cooperating to achieve the goals that the state has. Okay, so this is basically the body part of your answer. It's a 10 marker. You cannot do what? You cannot go on writing too many things. So you have to, no, you have to write at least this much, because that clarifies to the examiner that you know what is the basic demand, the basic content. Yes. Now, this is not that difficult, quite easy. I hope for all of you, this is quite easy. We have actually discussed this in the class for those who have attended the classes. For those who have not attended the classes but are writing test series, I hope that this much basic knowledge of public administration you have, and accordingly you can write about it. Okay? Now coming to the third part, which is the concluding part of your answer. Now, as it is a 10 marker, we are supposed to write somewhere around 150 to 175 words and limit our writing to that number of words. So you have very limited scope to write a elaborate conclusion here. Okay, so what is the conclusion that you write? The conclusion could be the contemporary view. That is, you can take contemporary examples to substantiate what you have written and thereby end your answer. Okay, so what will that result into? You can very likely, whatever the contemporary perspective is, you are able to write about it. You are able to correlate theory with that of practice, and that will help you end the answer. Okay, so how can you write about no how could you write about this? You can give a number of examples. Maybe you can use, देखो, you have to be innovative here. और again फिर से बोल रहा हूं मैं, most of the times what you are supposed to do is you are supposed to use the knowledge and correlate it. Correlation, the capability to correlate your answer would come a long way. It is going to come a long way. ठीक है, तो ये चीज ध्यान रखना कि you are not going to read everything directly in a textbook or in your notes in public administration. You have to develop that analytical skills, and analytical skills are developed. It is developed with revision. If you revise multiple times, if you think like that, that is how you develop those skills. Okay, so what could be the contemporary examples? A very good example of networked governance is community policing. Community policing is an example of networked governance, as it involves citizens. It's a more participatory approach. You can always emphasize on the PPP model as well. All these are what? All these are examples. ठीक है, all these are examples. See, I cannot scroll here. Okay, you have to write it in this manner. I will, from the next question onwards, I will write a much smaller so that you can read about it. Because if I try and scroll this up, everything that I have written would, it would vanish. Okay, so adjust करना पड़ेगा. ठीक है, बताओ. Isn't this not that difficult? ज्यादा डिफिकल्ट नहीं है. सिर्फ अपने नॉलेज को बेहतर यूज करना. दैट्स व्हाट इज फंडामेंटली रिक्वायर्ड. ठीक है. मोस्ट ऑफ यू नो बहुत बहुत एनालिसिस, एनालिटिकल, इस तरह की चीजें बहुत होती. रिमेंबर, एनालिसिस एंड बीइंग एनालिटिकल इज नॉट समथिंग दैट यू डेवलप on day one. You read your syllabus, you read it multiple times, you revise it multiple times, and then you develop the skills. Okay. Okay, so let us move on without any delay. Let's move on to the next question. Okay, remember, as soon as I press this, all of this will vanish. Okay, so what is the next question? Let us see the next question that we would be talking about. Again, easy questions are not what I am looking at. Those questions which are very predictable, the answers are very upfront. I'm not talking about those questions. I'm primarily using those questions which are which requires the necessary analysis. Look at this question. Question number 2A. Good governance and new public management are complementary yet distinct paradigm. Discuss with suitable illustrations. ठीक है. What are we talking about? Good governance and new public management are complementary but yet distinct paradigms. That means they are similar but they are not the same. So yes, there is a similarity, there is an overlap, but that similarity or overlap is something which it is not identical. Okay, so let us come to that. Question number 2A. See this question. Okay, now again, a proper structure is what I have always emphasized on. I believe an examiner who is looking at or and correcting an answer script written by an aspiring civil servant, for him, structure in the way he approaches his problems and no how he designs a solution to those problems requires proper structuring. Okay, so structure. So in this case, again, an introduction, a proper introduction would have to be written. And what would be the proper introduction? What is the theme? The theme is about what? The theme is about good governance and new public. No, it's about NPM and good governance. Okay, so NPM and good governance. It is about NPM and good governance. When I was going through your answer scripts for those who have written the test series, what I saw was that these two topics are something where uh, a lot of misconceptions or lack of clarity is there. Okay, so whatever I'm going to talk about, because it involves almost an overall analysis of the topic, so you have to hear me out very well. Okay, what is the introduction? Introduction is about NPM and good governance. Now, what would you write? You would write a background theme, a background theme, a background theme of the 1980s and 90s. The 1980s and 90s, where the governance theme developed in public administration. Okay, and this took the form of theoretical form of NPM, that is new public management, which was advocating privatization. It advocated institutional pluralism. It advocated institutional pluralism. It talks about what? It talks about efficiency. It talks about efficiency. And because the central theme of public management has always been efficiency, efficiency has been the central theme. So there was a belief during this period that efficiency can be achieved with privatization. So there was a correlation established between efficiency and privatization, that how private sector organizations are efficient, and therefore there needs to be more and more privatization of public services. Okay, so this was basically the thing. So you will write this, that how during this particular period efficiency was the central thing. Efficiency was what the scholars of public administration had emphasized on, highlighted. They demanded efficiency in administration, and therefore the emergence of NPM और पब्लिक मैनेजमेंट. ठीक है, ये लिखोगे. इसके अलावा आप क्या लिखोगे? इसके अलावा आप ये भी मेंशन करोगे that the concept of good governance developed almost simultaneously. Almost simultaneously. Almost simultaneously. It developed almost simultaneously. And because because it developed almost simultaneously, so the initial understanding was that good governance is equal to governance, or it is equal to privatization, it is equal to public management. Okay, that was what happened initially. This is your introduction. Okay, now in the body part of our answer, what is the body part of our answer? The body part of our answer is a comparison between what are the overlapping ideas in comparison to what are the differences. Okay, so you have to write both of it. You have to write the similarities. So what are the similarities? The similarities was with respect to the themes that was being advocated, the themes of efficiency, the theme of efficiency, the theme of accountability, the theme of responsibility, the theme of effectiveness. These themes remained the same because the the good governance view advocated efficiency. It advocated the concept of effectiveness. It advocated economy. It advocated accountability. So there was an overlapping theme, but there was also dissimilarities. Dissimilarities because NPM, new public management, had emphasized on privatization, whereas good governance did not do that. Good governance was more goal oriented. So this was what? Privatization remained the means, but good governance was not a means centric concept. Good governance was the goal centric. It was about what? It was about goal centric. Okay. So good governance was what? Good governance was goal centric. What goals are to be achieved? That was important. How it is to be achieved was not what was emphasized on by the good governance view. हाँ, कुछ स्कॉलर्स ने इनमें ओवरलैप ढूंढने की कोशिश की, क्योंकि अगर दोनों एफिशिएंसी की बात कर रहे हैं तो इट वाज अज्यूम्ड दैट इवन गुड गवर्नेंस इज एडवोकेटिंग प्राइवेटाइजेशन, है ना, and so on. But you would write about this idea that there was a difference because NPM means oriented, good governance, it was about goal centric. Okay. Similarly, good governance as an idea that was there, it did not limit itself to the participation of only the private sector, and it went beyond it. Okay. So where NPM primarily focused only on privatization, as a means, good governance was more participatory. It was more participatory in its orientation. Okay. But again, it is a 10 marker. So we have to understand how many points is to be written. We have to write similarities. We have to also write the differences that are there. Okay. So now we can move on to writing of the conclusion. So what would we write in conclusion? We could write the combined the combined criticisms, whether it is good governance or NPM, both had some very similar criticisms. Criticisms related to their context sensitivity, about how there was also a criticism of both of them having that exogenic idea that it was more Western centric and imposed from the top, okay, or imposed from outside. So West centric, how even good governance was criticized. Even good governance was criticized on this very ground that we are supposed to do what? We are supposed to ensure that it was something which was likely to benefit the Western countries. Why? No, because it was criticized of having an agenda, a West biased agenda. So that also a Western biased agenda. Okay. Okay. It's a 20 marker. Okay. It's a 20 marker, not a 10 marker. So you can add to this discussion. You can you can add to it. That means you can write about what? You can write about some more differences and some more similarities. Like you can in similarities write down the background of their evolution remained the same, because the background of NPM or public management was what? The background of public management was Thatcherism and Reaganism. Okay? Reaganism and Thatcherism. And the idea was, of course, efficiency. The background of good governance was World Bank's World Bank's sub-Saharan survey, which again was about the need for efficiency in administration. So you can add to that point, okay, the background part, similarities, you can add. uh, okay, that can be done. In these similarities, you can even there can be some other additions in these similarities also, like when we talk about NPM. When we talk about NPM and good governance advocated certain values which was not a part of the no the good govern the NPM paradigm. Okay, like good governance talked about the political context where it advocated democracy. Good governance talked about how there is a need for independence of judiciary, but these were not the ideas which were a part of NPM paradigm. Okay, so you can add this. देखो, again, it is not something which requires any outstanding knowledge. कोई भी एडिशनल चीज पढ़ने की जरूरत नहीं है. जो हमने पढ़ा है, whatever the basic books, if you have read, or no notes you have read, the basic idea that is there, the basic idea is what you have to write. It is up to you how you write it. Just a point wise, you want to write it point wise, you can write it point wise. Okay, let us move on. Let us move on now. Okay, let us move on, and we have seen this. Let's come to some other questions. Okay, like let's take this question number 5A. Governance is the capacity of government to steer the society. It is what? It is the capacity of the government to steer the society. Now, looking at this particular question, can you identify what is the key word here? One very important, there is a very important keyword here. Can you identify that? Can you identify that? So the keyword is steering the society. Okay, because this concept of steering has a very special meaning in public administration, because since the 1970s 80s onwards, there was a intellectual demand that grew in public administration. That intellectual demand was about how there is a need to reinvent the role of the state. And that reinvention was supposed to be what? The reinvention was supposed to be the steering role. It was supposed to be the steering role of no, of government. from rowing moving to steering. Okay, from rowing moving to steering. So governance is the capacity of government to steer the society, elucidate. Okay, now how are we going to attempt this? Okay, so we have landed at the right page. Governance is the capacity of the government to steer the society. So let us try and do what? Let us try and understand how do we frame this. First of all, in this question, again remember it's a 10 marker. So introduction would be related to the term governance and an explanation of this, which is that governance is what? Governance is how the government functions, that is the rules, laws, regulations, institutions involved, involved which assists the government achieve their goals. Okay, this is how you write an introduction to this particular question. Okay, moving on, coming to the body part, again it's a 10 marker, so we have to understand how much we can write in the introduction or the body part. And in the body part, we are supposed to emphasize on what? We are supposed to emphasize on the steering role. So you will write the contemporary view, where you will mention that how in public administration, the focus of public administration today is that the government should reinvent and adopt a steering role, which would mean what? Therefore, governance through participation of institutions, like the private sector, even civil society organization, they play an important role. You'll write about that. You will write, see, capacity of government to steer society, which means what is the objective? The objective is that through the participation of these organizations, the overall aspirations of the state, the society should be achieved. Okay, now the next part of the question is about how well or what steps are required for the government to do this. That means how No, because governance is the capacity of the government. So what are the ingredients, components of this capacity of the government? So how well the government can do what? How well the government can steer, how well the government can steer the society to achieve its goals, and for that what steps or what initiatives need to be taken. So you can write about what is the need for the government, what are the steps needed for the government to do. Like we can here include what? We can include steps like how can the government incentivize the private sector, but there is also a need to regulate the private sector. So what can be the steps taken for regulation of the private sector? There is a need for involving the civil society organizations, and how civil society organizations can act as an effective check. So what are the steps that can be taken by the government to facilitate this role of civil society acting as a check over the other institutions? How can the government facilitate this role? Okay, how can the government facilitate this role? At the same time, there is also a need for bureaucratic efficiency. So you can write about the need to improve the efficiency of the bureaucracy. A very small, see, at least this is what you are supposed to write. Even if you don't write this point, because it's a 10 marker, so of course there are some word limitations that are there. So that is something which is understood. And accordingly you are supposed to do what? Accordingly you are supposed to frame it. So that is understood. But these 3 points, because capacity of the government, so what involves, how can the government ensure that it very, very efficiently adopts that steering role, and what are the steps required? So these are the steps required. Then you will come to the conclusion part of it. And in the conclusion part of it, what can you write? You can in the conclusion part you can write certain contemporary examples. That is one way. Or you can even write the NPS view, new public service view, where they do not agree to this steering role that is there. So to balance your answer, you can even criticize this aspect by introducing the new public service approach. Okay, and how scholars like Denhart were critical of the steering role, because they felt that steering could result into marginalization of the state, and how it was a democracy diminishing concept. Okay, how it was a democracy diminishing concept, you can use that here. Okay, so again this is something that is the basic aspect. Any one of us who has read public administration has read about the steering role of the government. You have read about the NPM perspective. You have read about how since the 1970s, 80s, there was a criticisms related to the state, and how they felt that the state was not an appropriate institution, or at least bureaucracy was not an appropriate institution for for ensuring development and efficiency, and accordingly alternatives to bureaucracy and alternative approaches to state doing everything started emerging. ठीक है, जितना देखो इस तरह से आंसर आपको लिखना। अब ये आंसर क्या है? ये इफेक्टिव आंसर है। इट हैज करेक्ट इनपुट, from theories, from all this idea. You can write about names of certain scholars, you can drop in important terminologies. तो ये आपको काफी it could be a effective answer. ठीक है? Okay, let's move on. NPM, we have taken up a lot of questions related to NPM. So let us avoid that and come to the third question. The spirit of Minobrook, the desire for the field of public administration to make a positive difference in the world in a very concrete way, is still alive and thriving. Examine. Okay? This is basically the question that has been asked here. Now, the spirit of Minobrook, how, in a very short form, if we need to just summarize the question, what is the question demanding? The question is simply demanding that you write how the spirit of Minobrook, which means the ideas which were propagated by the first Minobrook conference, it remains to be relevant even today. Okay, that is basically what the demand of the question is. So what we do, we basically, let's try and answer it. Okay, the spirit of Minobrook. So this question is not that difficult. Anyone who has read the Minobrook conference can easily understand what the demand of the question is. So the introduction part of this question would be what? Where you write the goals identified, the goals identified by Minobrook. Primary, the goals of what? The goals of equity, the goal of relevance, the goal of change. Okay, this is your introduction, very simple. Then we will come to the body part of our answer, and in the body part of our answer we will now look at what is the contemporary relevance of these themes. Okay, so we can write about the themes one by one and present the contemporary relevance, how it is still alive. So how the goals as identified by the Minobrook conference remains alive. Today, relevance being the goal. So how is relevant? How does the goal of relevance remain? Even today it remains alive, even after the Minobrook conference. In a way, has now the Minobrook, the ideas of Minobrook is not considered to be relevant, but the goals remain still alive. So relevance, how? Because with changing times, like if there has been today we are living in an era where there has been like if we talk about post Second World War, what happened post Second World War? Emergence of the subfield of development administration. Subfield of development administration. Now, this subfield of development administration that came up, what was basically it? It was about relevance, because public administration now was going global. And today, that means we are talking about the era of development administration. During this particular era, what was the most important theme? The most important theme was development, because in the post-war era, the newly independent countries, they started looking at development, socio-economic development, as their goal. So what happened as a result of it is that public administration answered this by a subfield of development administration. Clear? Similarly, you can also give an example of NPM. During this particular era, what was the most important what was the most important demand that emerged from the ecology? The demand of efficiency. And public administration, how did public administration answer this? The public administration answered this by advocating privatization and steering role. Clear? So relevance. Similarly, if we talk about equity, social equity. Social equity remains a continued theme for every society. And every society, every state, every state is trying to do what? Every society, every state is trying to achieve equity. That is the kind of elitism that a society might have. How to overcome it? Those who are vulnerable, those who are disadvantaged, how to ensure that there can be steps taken to to address that. So equity remains the goal, and even today it remains the most important goal for almost every state. Clear? So every society, every state follows that. Therefore, the goal of equity remains relevant even today. It is alive. It is still it is still something which continues to be one of the basic requirements that are there. Then comes change. Change meaning what? First, we have to explain how traditional public administration adopted more or less a status quoist approach, and how Minnebrook Conference advocated what? Minnebrook Conference advocated for change. And how do we see that change today? We see that change today in the form of reforms. And there is a continuation or a continued demand of reforming administration in order to do what? In order to again better achieve the goals that the state has. Okay, so reforms, that is there. Okay, देखो, how is it alive and thriving? It is alive because everything that is being advocated, that was advocated by Minnebrook, which can be considered as the spirit of the Minnebrook Conference, we see that even today. Okay, what could be written as a part of conclusion? As a part of conclusion, we can write about certain things in Minnebrook, or that happened during Minnebrook Conference, the first Minnebrook specifically, which today seems to be outdated, or it seems not to be any more relevant, like the radicalism. The radicalism that was present in the tone and temper of the participants of the Minnebrook Conference, that radicalism does not remain relevant even today. Okay, in fact, Minnebrook was criticized for this. Okay, You can even write about how Minibrook presented nothing new. It presented nothing new. So it would not be correct to to give this to give this success, to allocate this success to the Minibrook conference. क्यों? क्योंकि मिनुब्रुक ने पहली बार ये एडवोकेट नहीं किया था, ये तो उससे पहले भी एग्जिस्ट करता था। इन थीम्स को हम उससे पहले भी देख चुके हैं, चाहे वो द आइडियोलॉजी ऑफ कम्युनिज्म हो, वहां पर भी हमने, या सोशलिज्म, वो भी हमने देखा है। तो यू कैन राइट दैट एंड अकॉर्डिंगली एंड योर आंसर। ठीक है, बैलेंस इट आउट। ओके, देखो, I'm not saying that you cannot write any other thing, but remember it's a 10 marker। कितना लिख पाओगे ये जरूरी है। ठीक है, कितना लिख पाओगे, जब तक पूरा आंसर नहीं लिखोगे तब तक इट वुड बी नो इट वुड बी वेरी डिफिकल्ट। ठीक है, देखो, does the tribunalization violate constitutional culture in the country by over regulatory capture of judicial power, or such autonomous bodies are necessary to foster efficiency in administration? Justify your view। देखो, this is exactly what you see in those no, in public administration, no, in public administration questions। डिमांड बहुत सिंपल है, but it is worded in such a manner that it might feel that okay, you do not necessarily know this, but again that is not true, because simple, the idea, basics, if you get your basics right, like when we were discussing the topic administrative law, in the topic administrative law we have talked about tribunalization। और मैंने जब आपके आंसर्स चेक किए, those who have written this test, specifically those who have attempted the through test series, I found that no, you are not able to, you are not able to pinpoint what is the basic theme। What is the basic theme? The basic theme is about how tribunalization has been a problem, but at the same time it has served a very important purpose। So tribunalization, that is creation of multiple tribunals, so many tribunals that are there, this has done what? This has actually encroached upon judicial power. That's the problem part। And then you have what? Then you have the solution part or the advantage part। So tribunals that are there, these tribunals have been very effective as well, and it has been able to address some very important issues of what? Some very important issues faced by the judiciary। This is the basic gist of what the demand of the question is, है ना? And whenever you are writing, you are supposed to first of all emphasize on this demand। एक दिमाग में क्वेश्चन पढ़ते हुए ही एक बेसिक थीम should be, it should emerge। And how does that happen? When you read, when you read the questions multiple times, you have, you are in the practice of reading and writing what the question demands। When you do this, you evolve and you accordingly developed this this acumen of answer writing। और उस समय क्या होगा, जब आप किसी एक चीज को पढ़ोगे, once you read a statement, you don't need to read it twice, you will develop that capability। it does not come once, or it does not come with reading multiple things। ये ध्यान रखना, sources should not be, it should not be more than a very limited amount of things, like maybe notes, maybe a book or two, not more than that, because if you start going beyond that, you are very likely to do what? You are very likely to commit a very fatal mistake। इसीलिए ये नहीं करना है। Okay, one thing that I have noticed when you are writing these answers, that you miss some very key points। That means you don't have to oversimplify things। public administration has a specific language, some words they need. Not you cannot substitute them. Okay, you cannot substitute these words. So what you have to do is you have to try and write your answers by using the same words. Okay, like let us try and address this question. The question is question number 5E. Okay, okay, this is the question. What is the introduction? See, this is a question which here is 10 marks, but ye dhyan rakhna, this question has enough content for you to be asked even as a 15 or a 20 marker. ठीक है, यही क्वेश्चन आपसे 15 मार्कर में भी पूछा जा सकता है. Okay, so that will not be a surprise if it is asked. First, you have to write about tribunals. And basically you will write what exactly are tribunals. What exactly are tribunals? You are not supposed to write in this question because the question in the body part demands positives and negatives. So you cannot write the positives of tribunals in the introduction itself. Write what are tribunals, and try and correlate it to the idea of administrative law. Okay, so it can be done either you start your answer by writing what tribunals are and in the introduction itself mention about administrative law, or you start first by writing about administrative law. You write, you try to describe it, and then you present tribunal as what? Tribunal as a part of it. Tribunal as a part of it. Okay, you write that part. Clear? That's your introduction. Then comes the body part of your answer. And the body part of your answer has two things. You have to write about the merits of tribunals, that is what purpose it serves, and you have to also write the criticisms of it. Okay, so if you look at the question, the question first asks about how tribunalization violates the constitutional culture. So you can do what? You can start writing your answer by first writing the criticisms. And what could be the criticisms? Some, as it says, constitutional culture. So how does tribunal violate constitutional culture? It violates constitutional culture because tribunals can contradict the very idea of separation of powers and checks and balances. Okay, separation of powers. Why? Because according to the theory of separation of powers, the power to to take up judicial interpretations that are there, to interpret the law, that lies with the judiciary. Here, what we see is that tribunals start performing the same functions. Okay, so how is it a violative of, how is it violative of constitutional culture? It's violative of constitutional culture because there is a issue related to separation of powers. How there can be issues related to violation of separation of powers as well as checks and balances. One of the very important, one of the very important principles of any democratic, any constitutional political structure is the phenomena of checks and balances. Here what we see is that administration goes beyond its jurisdiction, and therefore probably the checks that should be imposed on the executive arm by the judicial arm is not present anymore. Okay, so that is something that you will write. Then you will also mention what? You will also mention that it, according to AV Dicey, tribunalization could be interpreted as a violation of rule of law. It is what? It can be seen as a violation of rule of law. Why? Because rule of law says what? Rule of law says that every individual is under the law and can be punished for the breach of law. Okay, and no one should be a judge of his own case, in his own case. Here, administration may be responsible for, or the bureaucracy that is there, bureaucracy or administration may be responsible for what? They may be responsible for adjudicating issues where administration itself is one of the parties to such disputes. It is one of the parties to such disputes. Okay, so what do we see? Rule of law. It may be seen as a contradiction of rule of law. Okay, one of the most important criticisms related to, which is an extension of the criticism of checks and balances idea, tribunals and administrative law has been criticized by some experts as new despotism. It is what? It is new despotism. अब ये important चीज, ये मैंने देखा था. This is what I want to emphasize on. देखो, when I was reading your answer scripts, I found that only some of you remember these terminologies and have the capability to write it there. अब देखोगे कि there has been a criticism to this idea, whether it is the phenomena of delegated legislation, whether it is a phenomena of tribunalization. It has been criticized on the ground that it is a new form of despotism that has emerged. New form of despotism that has emerged. Clear? So what you need to do? What you need to do is you have to include these terminologies, explain the meaning of it in your answers. It makes your answers more relevant, better, you know. So that is there. And then you can write about, again, because it's a 10 marker, तो हमें positives भी लिखना है. And in positives part, you can write how administrative law is the result of what? Or tribunals is a result of what? Tribunals is the result of the evolving ecology of any country, or for that matter any society. It's the ecology, it's the ecological demand. Why? Because there has been a growth related to what? There has been a growth related to, or you can say there has been more complexity. Complex governance has become more and more complex. Governance has become what? Governance has become very complex today. Because of this growing complexity of governance, what has become the problem? The problem is that the judiciary that is there, the members of the judiciary may not understand or may not comprehend this complexity. So the judiciary has a judicial sense. That is, judiciary has legal sense. Judiciary has legal sense. But judiciary does not have what? Judiciary does not have administrative sense or administrative understanding. Administrative understanding. And that is where tribunals can play a very important role. Okay, you can maybe add the ideas like, in this point itself, you can add ideas like how justice delayed is justice denied. Is justice denied? Justice delayed is justice denied, by emphasizing on how there have been pendency of cases and so on. You can write about also how tribunals work on what? The basic principle, not on procedures. They work on principles of natural justice. Principles of natural justice. This is what guides. Principles of natural justice is what guides tribunals. Okay, it guides tribunals. Clear? And therefore, how the legal procedures become very complex. Tribunals do not follow this complex procedures. They work no they work more, you can say, informally, but at the same time they are guided by the principles of natural justice. You can write about these positives. Clear? So you can write about the positives and negatives related to this particular related to this particular answer. Now, have we answered the question? Look at this. How does it violate constitutional culture? Have we written about it? Yes, we have written about it. New despotism, you can write arbitrary authority. One institution becoming very powerful. This is not what the constitution emphasizes on. How it violates constitutional culture, we have seen that. Over regulatory capture of judicial powers, you can write about how this has captured judicial power, something which was the domain of judiciary. Now bureaucracy and administration is interfering that. You can write about that. Or such autonomous bodies are necessary. Why it is necessary, we have written that as well. Okay, now because in this kind of a question you have already written what the positives and negatives are, so how do you how do you end this answer? That is, what is a conclusion that you write here? And in the conclusion part, you write suggestions. What do? You write suggestions. You make certain suggestions with no in order to ensure the effectiveness of the tribunals. So you cannot disagree with the tribunals part. Why? You cannot disagree because it is something which no which is the reality of today. Even the government of India, even the constitution of India has talked about it. So you cannot you cannot blatantly just leave your answer by criticisms of it. You have to justify it as well, and you have done that. So in the conclusion part, you can write about what could be the steps taken for bringing it, bringing tribunals, making tribunals a more effective institution. You can write about that. Okay. So suggestions could be written as the no as the conclusion of your answer. Okay. Let us look at one more question. Let's find one more question. Look at this. The phenomena of disaggregation and devolution of state, which roots can be traced to public choice approach, has not experienced a smooth journey and is still far from achieving its objectives, especially in developing countries. Discuss. देखो, क्वेश्चन सिंपल है, लैंग्वेज डिफिकल्ट है. अगर क्वेश्चन नहीं समझे, आपने पब्लिक चॉइस अप्रोच पढ़ लिया है, फिर भी समझ में नहीं आया, तो इट इज नॉट बिकॉज यू no, it's not because you don't know what the answer is. It is because you are unable to decipher what is the basic theme being demanded and what is the reason for it. The reason for it is the no, the language of the question, you might find the language of the question to be difficult. इस वजह से ऐसा हो सकता है ना? अब क्वेश्चन का डिमांड क्या है? इफ यू लुक एट द क्वेश्चन इज बेसिकली रिलेटेड टू पब्लिक चॉइस अप्रोच, एंड इट इज सेइंग दैट द disaggregation and devolution of state which roots can be traced to public choice approach, which means that it is making a statement that the decentralization of state's power, the devolution of state power was for the very first time advocated by public choice approach. ठीक है, ये पहला एस्पेक्ट है. दूसरी बात, it has not been a smooth journey, especially in developing countries. So why it has not been a smooth journey in developing countries, you have to write that. ठीक है, so you will start what? You will start the introduction by writing about the public choice approach, a brief idea as to what it advocates, है ना? So first you will write how public choice approach is an application of the theory of economics to public decision making or collective decision making. That is how you start. Then you write, what does public choice approach advocate? Public choice approach advocates that every human being is a utility maximizer, and therefore it advocates that there is a need for institutional pluralism, because every individual is a utility maximizer, so they know how they are supposed to choose. They can maximize their utility. तो वो अपना चॉइस खुद कर सकते हैं. स्टेट को उनके बिहाफ पर चॉइस करने की जरूरत नहीं है. Every individual has the capability to make those choices from taking into consideration their interests. This is something which you write in the introduction part. The second part is that is the body part. You write how it advocates institutional pluralism by advocating that the private sector that is there, the private sector should get opportunity in delivery of public services, because to think that the bureaucracy and the decision makers are taking decisions in public interest without thinking about their utility, without maximizing their utility, is what is romanticism at best, है ना? You will write that, and then you will just write a point or two related to what it advocates, institutional pluralism, so and so on. ये लिख दिया, ठीक है. अब आप आ गए किस बात पर? Why it is not a smooth journey. So here you will write about the criticisms of public choice approach. Why is it not a smooth journey? Especially when it comes to developing countries. देखो, for public choice approach to work effectively, there is a need for proper choices. That means if there are multiplicity of institutions, only then only then people can exercise their choice. But that is not the case when it comes to डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज. क्यों? क्योंकि जो प्राइवेट सेक्टर्स हैं वो भी बहुत लिमिटेड है, ठीक है. दूसरी बात, देयर इज एन एलीट डोमिनेंस दैट इज देयर. सो इन डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज, बिकॉज पीपल आर मोर डिपेंडेंट अपॉन द स्टेट, so if the private sector is given the authority to deliver public services, there would be an elitism. That will be a problem. You will write about that as well. You will talk about the problems related to private sector, how they only think about their profit rather than public interest. You'll write about that, है ना? And then accordingly you can do what? You can end your answer. Okay? Basic question. Okay? So this is basically how you attempt answer writing. I have chosen these questions. And these questions are based exactly on the kind of questions you get in UPSC. By analyzing the trend, which question or which aspect of your syllabus is more emphasized on, taking that into framing the questions in accordance to the difficulty level as asked by UPSC, all of that taken into consideration, we have come up with this test paper. I hope for all of you who have who are writing your mains examination, who have attempted this test, uh, there is some value that this test paper adds to your preparation. This discussion, it is right now the first discussion. Soon we will we'll come up with the second question paper also. The second paper which was held, what was the what was the questions there, and some questions I will take up for discussion here as well. Okay, so if you have attempted it very well, if not, go through it. This video would be very helpful for those who are first timers or those who are writing mains examination. If you maybe no if it is more likely like you have to see this video maybe more than once to properly comprehend some of these ideas. Some of you whose preparation is already over, you will be able to do it maybe at one go itself. Okay, so I hope this adds value to your preparation. This is where we are going to end our discussion for today. Okay, we'll meet soon with the second paper. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.